Welcome, everybody. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. So glad you're here. We're coming in at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. My name's Dayal. I'm here with the Chuta Gopi, our third co-host, trio partner in crime. Kishore Chandra is not with us today, but we wish him well, and we'll see him next week. How you doing, Chuta?
I'm doing all right. It is all of the humidity in New York.
Is it?
All of it.
Have you been outside this morning?
No, but the 97% humidity is seeping into my home.
I got it. Like your walls are sweating. I hear you. I hear you. Not a fan of the humidity, it seems.
I don't mind it, but at a certain point, my body begins to protest. Why are we in an armpit perpetually?
Okay, well, today's section we're going to read is on tolerance. Not really. We've been reading through the Journey Within here. We're going to read through the Journey Within, have some spiritual wisdom thrown at us through this beautiful text. The Journey Within is a text on Bhakti Yoga, and it is written by His Holiness Radhanath Swami. And we've been reading these little excerpts and sections. And today we're going to read page 111, if you're reading along, and practicing the Dharma of Bhakti. It's the opening section of a whole chapter called Practicing the Dharma of Bhakti. Yesterday we read the second section in this book chapter, See the World with Compassion, the highest expression of Dharma. And we read this beautiful verse. It is said that great personalities almost always accept voluntary inconvenience because of the suffering of people in general. This is considered the highest method of worship, worshiping the Supreme Soul who is present in everyone's heart. And we spoke about this, how our spiritual progress doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that the way that we treat others and live in a mood of service towards others is an intricate part of our own spiritual advancement. And at the same time, we looked at capacity and burnout and resentment and compassion fatigue, and about how it's important for us to not take on the role of or develop the savior complex, or I'm the listener, I'm the space giver. Like those become identities that we take on that aren't always healthy to carry, and that more than anything, we are partners of a divine higher power that is um, present in everybody's life. And really, we talked about the element of prayer and how our prayer becomes more, how can I partner with divine will, and what role am I meant to play in any given situation, not which is a temporary role that is just an element of service. So we're talking all about that, and that was the section right before that. The prelude is practicing the Dharma of Bhakti. It's in this section. So what I love about this, and I'm just on a roll here, Achita, so forgive me. I Bhakti itself is a very active form of spirituality, and so it extends into how we show up in the world. It extends into how we treat other people. It extends into how we pursue our career, pursue our relationship, pursue our hobbies, how we go about our diet and our eating, how we go about recreation, how we go about anything in life. And it's very much meant to be a fully integrated part of our life that informs every aspect of our life um, in a cohesive way. And so this idea of practicing bhakti, and how it's not separated from anything in our life, but integrated is a huge part of it, and a huge hallmark of bhakti itself. And so I'm excited that we're reading this particular section today, because I think that is something that gets people struggle a lot with, like my spiritual life and my material life, my spiritual friends and my material friends. I go to work, and then I go to the temple, or I go to church, or I go to wherever it is that I perform my spirit. I go to the yoga studio, like wherever it may be. And I think blending those things and integrating those things is always a challenge. And so I think that this section may speak to some of that. So
Yeah, I'm also and because even just this morning I had like some thoughts revolving kind of around this same subject, and I'm sure we'll get into it after we read the passage. And I am still in need of a bell because even already I'm like, ding.
Ding 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 ding. We have scorecards. If you're new to the podcast, we have scorecards. We keep track of all the deep philosophical points that are made. We tally them up at the end, and we give cheesecake out to the winner at the end of each episode.
Jael has already made like 3 great philosophical points already.
I've gained 10 pounds since I started this podcast. Um, but and Pasha is our official. We have a live virtual studio audience, and Pasha is our official scorecard keeper. So make sure you get on her good side. Practicing the Dharma of Bhakti. Should I read this? Do you want to read this?
You can read it, even though it does start with one of my favorite verses.
One of Achyutagopi's favorite verses from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 30. Ooh, it's a good one. For one who sees, this is Krishna speaking. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor are they ever lost to me. That itself is profound and beautiful. And this is the section written by Rana Swami now. Dharma comes from the Sanskrit root dri, meaning to hold, maintain, or keep. And by extension, in its noun form, quote, that which cannot be taken away because it is firmly part of something. Think of Dharma as a thing's inherent quality, that part of something that cannot be separated from it, the heat in fire or the sweetness in sugar, for example. If we want to follow knowledge to its source and pursue spiritual enlightenment, understanding the meaning and practice of Dharma is invaluable. I'm gonna pause right there, just because I think this was something that was coming up a little bit last night, Thursday night Kirtan. I was speaking, and is it okay if we pause for commentary along the way? Okay, Chuta got a thumbs up. Kimberly gave a thumbs up. Martin Luleshwari are giving me weird looks.
Asha's giving everyone tens across the board.
Pasha said she gives everyone tens, which means they're meaningless. But we appreciate them. I thought it'd be nice to just pause for some commentary along the way because that would make it a little more dynamic. But I was just thinking this. I go back to this verse also in the second chapter of the Gita, in the very, very beginning, when Krishna mentions the idea that each of us are eternal, that we are eternal living beings. And he gives a definition of truth and falsity, and it's synonymous with eternality, eternal and temporary. And the idea of, and he starts to introduce the nature of the soul, and that which is real, that which is true, is that which is everlasting. And that which is false or illusion is that which is temporary. And so when we start to look at this word of dharma, of the soul, or who am I, the eternal nature, what is essential to my being, we start to look at all the things that, if that were taken away, would I still be me? My career or and I think that so many people are faced with. I was just I think I referenced this documentary recently, this documentary called The Weight of Gold, which was narrated by Michael Phelps, one of the most accomplished Olympic gold medalists in American history, a swimmer. And it was called The Weight of Gold, meaning like the pressure of pursuing a gold medal. And it was about mental health and stress in the Olympic world and the post-Olympic blues, that is the sense of like, who the heck am I and what do I do after the Olympics? Like everything in your life is geared towards this identity that I am an Olympian and I'm seeking a gold medal and this is who I am, and everything is through that filter. And then it goes away and it's like, what do I do now? Like, who am I? And the sense of like when things get taken away, an athlete gets an injury, 2008, market crash in, global economic crash, 2008. Like I knew people who worked on Wall Street and their businesses failed, or they were fired, or they were let go. And it was like, I'm no longer a millionaire. Who am I now? and these crises, you know, and it leads to people taking their lives. It leads to people committing crimes. It leads to people leaving their marriages. It leads to all kinds of things. And so this idea of what is he like, that initial spiritual question of what is essential to who I am. And when we answer that, I think the idea of letting things go becomes a lot more easy, because I realize that that may have been important, or it may have served a purpose for some time, or I may have liked the feel of that in my life, but it's not really me. It's an add-on. It's an attachment, not an attachment in that like I'm attached to it, but like, you know, like a vacuum attachment. You know, you get those attachments and it's you snap it on, you can snap it off. You know, it's a snap on and it can be snapped off. And so I'm just, those are all just my thoughts coming out in this world of this word of dharma and how it relates to, because he's going to get into who are we, what's our dharma, and that
What I
question of what's really me.
I think what I also love about this, even this first paragraph, is that dharma sometimes feels like such a heavy word,
Mm,
which makes sense because this root meaning to hold, to maintain, to keep is the same thing that forms dhara or dharti or the earth. This
mm,
idea of the earth being able to hold and keep all of these, hold up all of these burdened people, whatever it is. So it sometimes feels like such a heavy word, and what's being broken down is the notion that it has to be heavy. The idea of dharma is what comes naturally. Like the idea of dharma, the fact that you see warriors, but they don't often have to try to have the inclination to be warriors. It simply is. There are people that just have more fiery natures. There are some people who are just naturally more in the background or behind the scenes. It doesn't make them bad or good, just different. And so this idea of dharma, this idea of the constitution of the soul, is actually something that should come naturally.
mm,
Like sugar, naturally it's sweet. It doesn't have to try, doesn't have to fit in, doesn't have to wake up in the morning and say, okay, let me go make this effort to be sweet. It just is. And
mm.
I really like that breaking down of this heavy, heavy concept, this idea, this really complex thing, because we like wake up and like, okay, I gotta go to work, I gotta do all these things, but the things that we give our time to can actually be what comes naturally.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't, he's not necessarily, I don't know if he's going to get into it in this part of the book and the journey within, but in the Gita there are, and in Vedic theology and thought and literature, there's two types of dharma that are described. Um uh there's our constitutional dharma and our conditional dharma. So, like our eternal dharma beyond this life, like who are we as eternal spirit souls? And that's what I think is going to get brought up here in this section of the book, our eternal dharma. And then there's also our conditional dharma, meaning like our dharma in this life. Like we inhabit a body the way like a crab inhabits a shell, you know, or we have these, you know, I always think it's interesting, like, you know, the idea of like a space suit, like you want to go out into outer space, you got to wear a space suit. But it's like, we're wearing a space suit right now. It's called a human body, you know, and it allows us to live on this earth, you know, in the same ways that fish have another spacesuit that allows them to live in water. And it's like we are spirit souls wearing a suit called a human body and a human mind. And and so while we're inhabiting this machine, this uniform, this suit, this vehicle that allows us to function, like they're all made different, like cars. And so they have and not just our physical body, but our mind, you know. Ayurveda psychology is like a growing field that people are getting into. Or we talked about yesterday, human design or your Enneagram or your Myers-Briggs or like whatever it may be. Um, or the Varnas and the ashrams in spiritual life. You know, are you a person into commerce? Are you a person into management and leadership and administration? Are you more of a philosophical academic and a teacher? You know, are you a person that works with your hands and so these different different inclinations of action and work. And I think that I love what you mentioned about it being natural to who we are, because I think that in in a world where we're not meant to know what's going on in so many other people's lives the way that we do today. It's just not natural for me to know what's happening in thousands of other people's lives, like celebrity culture. For me to know what's happening, like People magazine, not natural. Not natural to the human condition. Social media, not natural for the human condition. To know what's happening in so many people's lives in such detail, like we're not meant to have that many individual relationships. Like the human heart and mind is meant to have fewer but deeper and meaningful. Um, and so I think that when we live in this world where there's so much awareness on such a level of what so many other people are doing, it leads to confusion of who am I? Because I look and I think, well, that's who I should be. That's who I should be. That's who I should be. Was working out for them. That's who I should be. And what we want the goal. We want happiness, fulfillment, connection, purpose, etc. And when we see somebody else allegedly, and I say allegedly because I think that what we see obviously is not always true, but when we see other people seemingly get that through a particular path, we think, oh, that's the path to it. Just like, like you put on Google Maps and there's a path to get somewhere. It's like, no, but your path is so different. And so much of our experiencing, whether it's depression or anxiety or stress or burnout, because we're doing what's natural for somebody else, but not really tuning in. And then what happens is when we find what comes natural to us, we feel guilty about it, or we think it's not enough, or it's not big enough, or shiny enough, or makes enough money, or like whatever it is. And we start to tune out to the little voice in our own heart, super soul within, the natural rhythm of who we are in this world. We start to drown out that voice and start listening on a megaphone to all the other voices around us, and it becomes really hard to figure out who we're meant to be and what is our conditional dharma in this life. And I think that the idea of giving space to find what comes natural to me, what lights me up, what's my passion, I think is so important, and we don't give ourselves that space or encouragement enough.
Yeah, definitely. Although, and I also, even a few months ago, even when we started this podcast, I was of the opinion, you know what? I don't think we were meant to know so much about everybody in the world. Like that's not a thing. Like right now, this whole social media boom has made it a thing. And then just now, it's like, actually, I want to challenge that idea. Really? Do we think so? Because Vedically, the world view was much smaller than we have it today. Kings were kings of much more vast places, and people had a much more vast array of knowledge. I think sometimes, like you said, though, what happens is when we allow that noise to overtake our personal journey,
Hmm.
I think some of that knowledge, people were still hearing about things that were happening. And they were hearing things about things that were happening in different planets, even. So they were hearing things
Imagine
about,
if social media extended
right.
interplanetary social
Yeah.
media.
It was like intergalactic, like dimensional. They were hearing about things that were happening on other dimensions. They had actually more knowledge than we can even comprehend today. But like you said, they also left space. They had meditation practices that they left
Yes.
that room for them to figure out, who am I? Where do I belong? What is my purpose? Not just of this body, but of this soul, because this is much bigger. So, with that extra information came the actual hard hitting knowledge that this is way bigger than my one tiny jiva human existence.
Yes. I 100% actually agree with you, and what I'm hearing you say is that it's not that it's wrong or bad or even unhealthy to have access to, you know, information about people's lives on a large scale, but there's a responsibility, there's a maturity, there's almost like a qualification that comes from that. And we've been handed these things. It's like there's no it's just like when you turn 18, everything's allowed now. Like who decided we get the internet? Like who decided that it's
Yeah.
okay for us to use this tool however we want? You know what I mean? Like who decided that we just get to have this? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that what something that gets lost in a culture where there's no spiritual values, where anything goes, where it's just like there's no there's just nothing. It's like you're
Yeah.
18, you're an adult now. It's like, am I really? You know?
It's like there's no checks and balances anymore. There's no like anybody can publish a book. And it used to be such a very a very meticulous process, editor after editor after editor, judging your qualifications. And like you said, now where there's no qualifications, everything is a news source. Everything
Yeah.
kind of becomes valid. There's no sense of qualification, and I totally agree. In a situation where like you get mantras, but they would prepare you with those mantras for a long time. They would
Yeah.
make sure you were qualified. They would make sure the intonation was proper. They would make sure you knew how to properly use them and to discharge them and to take them back. Like these mantras were weapons. They didn't just hand them out to anybody. Oh, like now here you go. You're 12. You get all this stuff. They prepared them for a really long time in how to use them and how to take them back and how to properly access all of this weaponry and all of this information. And we don't have that anymore. It's just like mass kind of like pandemonium. Here you go.
Yeah.
Everybody's got access to everything. Like that
There's
person is not even qualified. Like what's happening? But there
there's
you
an
go.
there's an episode of Seinfeld because everything points back to Seinfeld, where Elaine goes to a bar mitzvah, and I think you're 13 in the
Yeah.
Jewish when you become a mitzvah, and so it's like there's this a boy has his bar mitzvah at 13 and become a man, and then he tries to kiss her, and he's 13 and she's, I don't know, 20s or 30s in the movie, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm a man now. And she's like, no, you're not. And then there's like this whole thing between like her boss, who is like the father of who's Jewish, and it's like, well, what are you telling him? You're confusing him. He's like, he's not a man. He's like, no, he is a man now. He had his bar mitzvah. I was like, what? And so this
Yeah.
idea of like, and I love, and there's two things I want to mention on that point is that what is and I've referred to this book sometimes. Richard Rohr wrote this book, Falling Upward, and he talks about the two halves of life, and the second half of life being really, it's about spiritual maturity. And he talks about how often we see the second half of life is not, it's not marked by an age, it's not marked by a ceremony, it's not marked by an achievement. It's something that happens to you, and it can happen in your 20s, it can happen in your 30s. Some people get to their 60s and 70s and they never make that transition to
Mm.
the second half of life, where it's like you build this sense of spiritual maturity. There's more to it than that, but that's just the baseline of it, that the sense of like spiritual growth, maturity, adulthood doesn't happen at a certain age. It happens with a certain level of experience, introspection, and usually a good amount of trial and challenge and growth through that. Um, so I just appreciate that point that you brought out, Achuta, of the idea that it's not that having access to information or anything necessarily about culture as we see it, it's wrong, but it's when we're handed these things without spiritual maturity or grounding or values. And the second thing that I wanted to mention was just this point that Dunya has brought up a lot of times. I've in my conversations with her and points to me is this idea of being an informed consumer.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Being like you're saying, anybody can write a book, and in one sense, it's like we have free speech. People should be allowed to write and publish, etc. We don't necessarily always need to censor everybody, but we should be informed consumers. Just because somebody wrote a book, I'm the kind of person, whenever somebody says, and they've written dozens of books, I get a little concerned. I'm like, why are you writing dozens of books?
How are you writing
How are you writing dozens of books? Like, is nobody reading your first three? Like,
are they well written,
are
or
they well written?
is anybody
Is
checking?
anybody checking these books? Like, after you got to eight, like somebody should have been like, well, let's just distribute the first eight, you know. And not that writing dozens of books are bad. I know people who are authors that write a lot, and it's their dharma, it's what they do, and they churn out books. But
I
I'm
mean,
just
look
think
at Srila Prabhupada. But
Srila Prabhupada wrote 50 books,
I think they said the end count. I think they said like 80 volumes
80 volumes of books. He was churning them out. And so
in
it's
like
not
11 years, though. Like that's crazy. That's mystic potency right there. Like that is a superpower. And these books are like 500 pages long a piece. Like none of them, the majority of them are big books.
they're big books. Still working on them.
Exactly. I'm still working on reading them.
I can't even read them in 11 years.
Okay.
Um, but so writing a lot of books isn't bad, but I just think that for us, just because somebody wrote a book, just because somebody has a podcast, just because somebody has a lot of followers on social media, just because somebody, even seems to speak eloquently, we should do due diligence to be informed consumers of where we consume information, and especially even in spiritual life, where we take guidance from, where we take inspiration from. Just because somebody has a long beard and is from India, just because somebody can do a lot of yoga poses, just because somebody speaks in mystical couplets, you know, doesn't mean that they are a source of spiritual, you know, there's character. And that's why, and just to tie back to the page, because we're out of time here now, but tying it back to this practicing the Dharma of Bhakti that we went to is like, what is the essential quality of who we are, and what does it mean? Um, I'm just going to read this first line here of the second paragraph that we didn't get to, and we can pick it up on Monday. Bhakti Yoga teaches the Dharma of every living being is seva, or loving service. This means that loving service is the essential nature of the soul. Practicing bhakti yoga is about honoring the soul's dharma and focusing on transforming material actions into spiritual ones. And so, where this is going and how I take it is into character and compassion, which was the next section that we read yesterday. And so, this idea of in spiritual life, where we take spiritual inspiration and guidance from, we should be thoughtful in actually understanding what people are saying, matching it up to their character, holding people accountable for spiritual values, understanding our own spiritual values and where they line up in the world and where they don't, is all extraordinarily important.
My sister, we have a line. We always, anytime something happens, first thing, she's like, consider the source.
Consider the source.
Consider your source at all times. And I've
That's a
had
great one. That gets a ding, 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 ding. Pasha, does that get a 10?
she has to say
She
yes.
has to, everything gets a 10.
But yeah, it's so important, especially in spiritual life,
Yeah.
because we're devoting not only this life, but it's like this is dealing with my soul. I was joking with my sister yesterday, and I said, I was like, this is a matter of like my immortal soul, okay? Like Ekadashi is a big deal, like, and we were joking about it, and we laughed, but really, when we're putting our spiritual well-being in someone's hands, we have to consider the source. I've seen people who have had such antagonistic relationships with their gurus and spiritual masters that they've had yelling arguments, and I'm like, oh Krishna, like, it's not good for anybody, not you, not them, not anyone. We have to consider the source. And then this entire conversation has reminded me of the Vedic Sanskrit word adhikar.
Mm,
And sometimes that word gets like a bad rap, but really it means your qualifications. It's our qualification. And it doesn't have to be looked at as bad or good, but what qualifications are speaking to you? What qualifications do we have? And Martha was speaking about this yesterday. Sometimes she feels unqualified to bring someone into a practice that she's still getting to know about. But that right there is qualification. The
Mm,
sensitivity to understand that, I don't know everything about this. That sensitivity right there is such a beautiful qualification. It means you can be sensitive to other people. It means you can be really sensitive about bringing forth this knowledge. It means you have an understanding of where you are and how far you have to go. That right there
mm,
is qualification. So
yeah.
Srila Prabhupada would also say our qualification is that we have none. And
Mm,
understanding that smallness of who we are, understanding what our actual qualities and qualifications and our character are, doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can simply be, okay, this is the truth of where I am right now. And really
mm,
understanding, so this is as much as I can give you because I'm
yeah.
still figuring it out. Sometimes being truthful is the best qualification.
Being truthful is the best qualification. Write that down, somebody. It's a good one. That gets a ding too. Ding, 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 ding. Kimberly, you got some takeaways for us? We'd love to hear from you, our official takeawayer, and then we're gonna look at what we're walking away with, and we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah, I got some takeaways today. So, bhakti is meant to be fully integrated into our life.
Mm,
We all have eternal and conditional dharma. Dharma is what comes naturally. Be an informed consumer and consider the source. There is a lot of information out there. Don't allow the noise to overtake your personal journey. And we all got to create space for ourselves to get in tune with who we really are so we don't fall into someone else's natural path.
mm, beautiful. Thank you. Chuta like that one. What's your takeaway, Chuta? What's one thing that you're walking away with?
That last one was so good. Like, be careful so that you don't fall into somebody else's natural path. That's like total
Mm,
paraphrasing my supreme bestie when he's saying, like, to perform your dharma, even incorrectly, is better than trying to perform someone else's. It's too dangerous. That's the one, man. It's
yeah.
it's really just looking at this is who I am. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm working with, and that is acceptable. Like even Krishna accepts that. And it's better to do what comes naturally to you even if you're struggling than to pretend to be somebody else perfectly.
Yeah. I'm walking away with yeah, this question, which sounds a little broad, but like this really who am I question, in this life, in this world, because I'm a person that I can do a lot. Like I see people doing something, I'm like, I can do that, you know, playing a musical instrument, learning a language, doing yoga. I'm like, I can do I can be a really good whatever it is. And it's like I got to do that. And like that will be, you know, an add-on to my life or an element that I can give, another tool in my toolbox. Like I can do like anything. And so it leads me to this place of just kind of running around doing all kinds of things. And I'm in this space of just kind of like really tuning in to more of like not more what can I do and take on, but more what can I let go of and just allow what actually comes naturally into my life. Like I look, yeah, I could be a really good this or that or whatever if I put the energy into it, but do I need to? Is that what's natural for me? Is that what God is calling me towards right now? And so yeah, and finding peace with that, finding peace with that rather than thinking I need the ego points of adding something into my persona, and just resting on that inner no, I don't want to use the word inner validate reassurance of those things. So Danny K, she's doing that too now. Yep, you and me both. We're all in it. Thank you guys all so much.
I'm
Tuta's in
ready.
it.
I'm in it.
She's in it. We're in the same boat. We need a bigger. We're gonna need a bigger boat.
Somebody call Noah.
Somebody call Noah. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Be well. It's Friday, and so we are off Saturday and Sunday. We'll be back on Monday. We'll see you soon. Be well. Take care. Bye bye.